Yes.
The time is 10:53 a.m. We are now back on the record.
Mr. Masloub, on the break that we just took, did you speak with your attorney about this document that we're looking at?
What we said is that privileged communications, but I'll tell you, we didn't talk about it.
So, Mr. Masloub, with the clarification I believe that we had on when we were off the record, that the numbering was probably added as part of the printing of the complaint in this matter as on the exhibits. Does that address the concern you had about remembering seeing numbering on the document?
That explains something, but not necessarily concerned. But I do not know who typeset this letter in your document versus the one we have. But let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and read it. And if I have a question or a concern, I will raise it accordingly.
Okay. Okay, so I read the first paragraph. I'm going to move down to Article 1. It says General Provisions, Business 101, 1.01, apologize, Business Address. The venture shall maintain its principal place of business at 20132 Sugar Gum Road, Riverside, California, 92508. That's your home, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Next line, MJ Ventures may relocate its office from time to time or have additional offices or mailing addresses as the venturers may determine. As of this time, MJ Ventures has never changed its address. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Next paragraph, 1.02 business purpose. The business of the joint venture shall be as follows: purchasing real estate properties, remodeling, rehabilitating, fixing, and selling for profit within a short period of time. Also, purchasing real estate properties, remodeling, fixing, renting, and managing them for a longer period of time. Does that appear to be an accurate representation of what's on the agreement you guys signed?
For all of this, I'm going to have a standing objection. The document speaks for itself, but I'm not going to. And Mr. Maslou, I want you to answer all of his questions unless I tell you not to. Okay.
Okay. If it's written that way, it is what it is. Yes.
And you have no reason to contend that this is accurate language on the original agreement you guys entered into, you and Mr. Salmon, in 2015, right?
I think you misspoke. You said accurate. Did you mean inaccurate?
I don't think I meant inaccurate. I think you do not do you contend that this is not accurate, or do you accept that this is an accurate rendering of the language in your agreement? When I say
This
agreement,
is
I'm always talking about this joint ventures agreement, just so we don't have any confusion.
okay. So in implementation of it, it is not accurate.
Wait a
In
minute.
the way it is written that way.
It was written that way, and
Correct.
this is what you signed, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I just want to move on. We'll don't have to use up too much time. 1.03 percentages. The interest of the parties in any gross profits and their respective shares in any losses and or liabilities that may result from their interests in all property and equipment acquired and all money received in connection with this venture shall be as follows. Name, Maher Masloub, joint venturer partner, percentage 50%. J. Salomon, joint venturer partner, percentage 50%. And that's always been the case from the beginning, correct? That you have always been 50% from the inception of this MJ Ventures business.
Correct.
I'm going to save time. Let me just do a quick glance through here. .05, I'm skipping 1.04. Both Maher Masloub and Jay Salmon shall meet when either one calls for a meeting, when need arise, but where circumstances warrant, telephone communication is authorized as long as both parties agree, acknowledge, and document what was agreed upon in writing and make such document as part of MJ Ventures documents. Did you and Mr. Salmon ever have any meetings in connection with MJ Ventures?
Yes, we did.
And what were those meetings? How many meetings have you ever had with him? I mean, not just talking to him, but something that you would classify as a formal meeting.
I can't recall.
More than 100?
I can't recall.
Well, I'm entitled to your best estimate.
My best estimate is between, I mean, honestly, I don't recall.
So it could have been more than 100?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I don't count the number of my meetings and my discussions and my text messages.
What do you mean in your discussions, in your text messages?
If I'm sending a text message or a phone call, or I talk to him about 15 different subjects in one phone call, I cannot tell if this is a meeting or not, or shall I count them all separate? I have no idea.
Did you ever have any meetings using Zoom?
I can't recall. Zoom was not a hot thing in those days, and especially in 2012, 2013.
So you're saying you don't recall any Zoom meetings with him?
I don't recall Zoom meetings. I do not recall.
Did you
I
ever
did
have
have phone calls with him, and I have face-to-face calls.
Did you ever have any meetings where you both together shared your screen, computer screens?
Possibly.
Did you ever have any meetings where, when you were sharing screens, you went onto the bank account and issued checks?
Those we have.
Okay. And when you had a meeting like that where you issued checks, what was the general, how did that normally come about? Was there a particular way that you held that meeting? You know, who wrote the check? How did
Objection.
that work?
Sorry, objection that is vague and ambiguous and overbroad, and it's unintelligible, especially as to time, and it assumes that there was a custom and practice.
You remember the question?
Is this question to me?
Do you remember the question?
Can you repeat it?
Yeah, I'm going to do my best. But you had mentioned you did have some meetings where you shared the screen and you did some sort of banking. Is that a fair representation of what we already talked about?
I don't recall if I shared the screen or we were on a phone where we are looking at the same portal, let's say bank portal, to pay checks. And there were a tradition on those, how we wrote those checks.
Okay, so we're talking only about the meetings that you had where you were having a meeting and you were, whether on the phone or using Zoom, you were doing some sort of banking and checks were written. So I'm asking you, was there a particular way that you organized that interaction where, and I'll give you an example, did you issue some checks and did Mr. Salmon issue other checks?
Yes.
And did you have a general way of doing that? For instance, if a check had to go to Mr. Salmon for management, would you write that check?
I would write that check.
And if there was a
and the reverse, because if I am benefiting from that check or I am so if there is any link to me misappropriating funds, he would write the check. If there's any doubt that he's misappropriating funds, I'll write the check. That was the convention.
Okay. Thank you. Um, and do you recall writing checks to him for management fees?
Yes.
And do you recall him writing any checks to you or to Marwan?
He would write the checks for Marwan. He would write checks for me because I did the accounting and I paid for software and I did the taxation and all that stuff. So I got reimbursed an annual fee. He would write the check to me. Yeah, I wouldn't write it for myself.
Okay, so if there, so some checks were written to Marwan and he was the one who wrote them. That would be
Yes,
fair to say? Okay,
all the time.
okay. I'm going to go down to 1.06 to look at it real quick. Maybe I won't read it. One moment. Yeah, I'm going to read it anyway. It says, A, all working capital or other funds received by MJ Ventures in connection with the rent or sale of a specific property shall be deposited in a checking account set up especially for the joint venture and requires both signatures of Maher Masloub and J. Salman for any withdrawals unless resolved differently by both. Said accounts shall be kept separate and apart from both venturers' personal checking accounts. Did you implement that particular paragraph?
Yes.
Okay. Did you set up, just to save time, did you set up a general checking that covered all, I don't want to say all, that was the general operating account for MJ Ventures? You had a general checking account?
No.
You didn't? So
It
how many
was not,
checking?
your question is ambiguous
Okay,
relative to what we had.
how many bank
You tell me,
accounts?
give me a checking account number and I'll tell you what the purpose of it was.
How many accounts, bank accounts, were set up for MJ Ventures?
As there are as many as there were properties, plus two additional accounts. One is a checking account for MJ Ventures, not for the properties, and one savings account for MJ Ventures, not the properties.
Very good, thank you. B, withdrawal of funds from MJ Ventures checking account may be made in such amount and by such persons as authorized by both venturers. Were there ever any withdrawals of funds taken where both venturers did not authorize it in advance?
Objection is overbroad, vague, and ambiguous, and misstates the evidence.
Okay, you can answer the question.
There were funds taken out of the checking accounts by an individual
Who?
without corresponding with the other person.
Can you tell me what that you're talking about?
Jay will always pay his contractors as a manager of the property unilaterally without consulting with me.
You say for the, he paid these for the, I'm sorry, who were the recipients of these funds?
The claim was they are the contractors that are working on the properties to maintain them, repair them, rehabilitate them, and so on and so forth.
Okay, is that objection, was that objectionable to you?
After 2015 became questionable to me.
Before that,
I
it
think
was
there was a
not-
level of trust that did not mitigate my concern.
a level of trust that did not mitigate your concern.
Correct.
I'm not sure I fully understand that. You're saying before 2015?
No, after 2015, okay, I'll rephrase. Before 2015, I didn't make a fuss about it for myself in my own mind. After 2015, I started getting concerns about Jay Solomon paying directly to vendors.
Did you feel like something improper was occurring when he did that, other than the fact that he was doing it unilaterally?
I think there was a sense that he had his own properties, and we had agreed that he can own his own properties, and he has the right to rehabilitate them. And in one property, he acquired concurrent with our combined properties. He was allocating more resources that are advantageous in price to his property and delaying the finish and the completion of our property, our joint property.
How many properties did he have, as like you're describing?
Well, the thing that caused the rising of my eyebrow was one property in specific. It was that made me concerned. The property was taking too long. Our property, joint property, was taking too long to finish, while his individual property was completing way ahead of schedule.
Do you know, can you tell me what that property of his was? Do you know the city, something to help me identify it?
It's in Barstow. It's in an enclave where the military upper echelon lives. I can't remember. It's like a little island, although the desert. In Barstow, I cannot. It's about close to Sky High School or something, or school. There's a school right next to it. It's called Sky something.
Is there any other property besides this particular one you're describing to me that he owned that you thought was somehow conflicting?
I cannot point because I lost interest after that.
Did you ever withdraw funds from any of these 6 accounts without speaking to Mr. Salmon first?
Unilaterally, I didn't.
Yes, sir.
I didn't.
So
As a matter of fact, my accounting fees since 2018 hasn't been paid, and I never took any initiative to pay it myself.
Did you ever withdraw any funds from any of those 6 accounts with his permission?
I wrote checks on the Wells Fargo portal for his benefit, yes.
For his benefit, tell me what that means.
His management fees.
Okay, management fees. Okay, besides the management fees, did you ever withdraw cash from any of these bank accounts with or without his consent?
I don't recall, no.
I'm going to move to the next page. Accounting and auditing, so 1.07. Says accounting shall be made, financial reports prepared and delivered to both insurers on a quarterly basis. Such books shall be available to either venturer upon reasonable notice and at any reasonable time. Who handled most of the accounting or all of the accounting for MJ Ventures?
I did the accounting and taxation.
Okay. And did you ever stop doing the accounting and taxation for MJ Ventures?
No, I file the taxes on time every year.
Are there records of these? Where do you keep the records of the accounting related MJ
A
Ventures?
Dropbox account.
The Dropbox account, okay. And do you try to keep everything in there? You try to keep everything together so that it's accessible to both partners?
Everything that changes or changes with my hands is always updated immediately there.
I don't think you asked the question, was it available to Mr. Salmon?
Yes, it was available to Mr. Solomon.
And this Dropbox, this is something available to both of you still, is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. Let me try to go through this quickly. 1.08, resolution of disputes. All disputes arising out of this joint venture agreement between the venturers that is not resolvable by good faith negotiations by the same in regards to one or more real estate properties shall be settled by selling that particular property or all properties owned at the time. In so agreeing, both partners expressly waive their right, if any, to a trial by jury, and these claims or any legal action against one another. Furthermore, each property in dispute and to be sold will be listed by a third-party broker unknown to either one of both venturers and sold separately, one property at a time. Now, you guys are currently, obviously, in this lawsuit having a dispute, but did you guys have any dispute that did not involve litigation?
Objection, it's vague and ambiguous. It lacks foundation and may call for expert opinion, legal opinion.
There are a couple properties that are still owned by MJ Ventures. Would that be correct?
Main Street, 2 different titles on Main Street, and one other property, Linda Lane. Yeah. So I think legally there are 3 properties. Physically, logically, there's 2 properties.
Well, there was one loan for the one that you're describing as 2 properties. It still encompasses a single loan, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so there's 2 outstanding loans for those 2 properties you described. Okay.
Yes.
Do you know why the properties have not been sold at this point and just the money put in a neutral place?
List pendants?
Is that the only reason?
Yes.
Are you agreeable to selling the properties and having all of those funds put into a neutral place until the resolution of this lawsuit?
I'm sorry, can I have the question reread, please? I didn't hear it all.
Are you agreeable to have those remaining properties sold and have all of the proceeds put into a neutral location until the resolution of this case?
I think the question is vague and ambiguous. It may assume attorney privilege and work product. The fact that the properties haven't sold speak for itself that didn't happen. And I think that's a topic of discussion between you and me when we're off the record.
All right, well, I'm going to object to the speaking objections. I just would like to know, Mr. Masloub, do you have any problem with those properties, in principle, with those properties being sold and the money put into a neutral place until the resolution of this case?
The money needs to be satisfying all of our liabilities. So if I'm leasing a computer for this business, that money needs to pay for the lease of those computers if the business is short of money. That's one thing. We have a judgment from Masloub versus Masloub that has to be satisfied from the judgment against MJ Ventures. So after all liabilities and commitments and covenants that we are attached to, I say then we can put the remainder in a neutral hub for storage.
So just so I understand, right now, those liabilities can't be satisfied because the properties are not liquidated. Did you agree with that?
Yeah, in a sense, yes.
Okay, so if they sell, would you agree that putting all the money and proceeds into a neutral place, in terms of those liabilities not being satisfied, nothing would change? It's just that the money would be here instead of the properties. Everything would remain the same. Would you agree with that?
I think that goes beyond the purposes of the deposition.
Yeah.
And it has to do with trial strategy. And I'm going to instruct him not to answer that question.
Okay. And you're going to abide by your attorney's instructions?
Yes.
To save time moving forward, if he instructs you not to answer a question, are you going to always abide by his instruction?
If it is for my best interest, yes.
That's never going to be an issue if a motion comes along, because I think the statute already indicates that if he doesn't answer, you don't need to ask that question anymore. But I'm not gonna dispute that if you don't have that caveat.
I'm going to scroll down and work through this, see if I can get this done. So I'm going to go to page 3, 2.04. The words joint ventures and partners are used interchangeably. Article 3, obligations of the joint venturers. J. Salmon is responsible for all operations and decisions of the joint venture and will be compensated for providing various services necessary for all everyday operations by sharing 50% of the profits of MJ Ventures. No other fees or salaries shall be paid to him except for $100 per month as management fee for each renter for each property that is owned by MJ Ventures and rented until any and all properties are sold. Do you know whether Mr. Salmon has been receiving $100 per month management fee for the properties that are still owned by MJ Ventures?
We have suspended actually paying each other. And so therefore, to answer your question, no, he hasn't since probably a few years.
The next paragraph, Maher Masloub is an equally responsible managing venturer as J. Salmon, and he is responsible for all operations and decisions of MJ Ventures. He will be compensated for providing various services necessary for all or any everyday operations by sharing 50% of the profits of MJ Ventures. No other fees or salaries shall be paid to him except for 6% interest for all money invested in MJ Ventures. We spoke earlier about that you were entitled to 6% interest for all the money that was loaned to MJ Ventures. Have you changed your opinion as to whether this is actually in this agreement?
Since 2012, I never received 6% on anything invested through MJ Ventures. Not a single penny.
So I'm going to
None of the checks were written to me.
Okay, I'm going to move to strike that response as non-responsive. My question was, do you agree that that is the correct language for this document? I read it correctly and you signed this document. Do you agree?
The document will speak for itself. Go ahead and answer.
What's your recommendation, sorry?
Answer the question.
It is what it is on this paper.
Did you read this document before you signed it?
Long time ago.
In retrospect, do you think you overlooked this?
I can't answer that question.
The question is argumentative.
Actually, you can't answer the question. I'm asking you, as you sit here right now that we've read that, does that seem like something you don't remember being in here?
I don't remember anything about this paragraph.
Okay. Next sentence, interest payments due to Maher Masloub and management fees due to J. Salmon shall be paid at the same time for all and any properties owned by MJ Ventures so as to keep accounting as easy and simple as possible. All of the profits and losses will be accounted for and distributed every quarter to both partners equally within 15 days of the end of the quarter. So when you had your Zoom meetings or whatever meetings we talked about earlier, where you didn't recall whether you shared the screen or whether you were looking at the screen over the phone separately, and you each cut checks whenever there was some sort of personal benefit, you would do it for each other. The I want to ask you, when Mr. Salmon cut checks, he made some payments in the name of Marwan Masloub. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And those payments represented principal and interest for the loan for a particular property at issue. Would that be correct?
Objection, Locke's Foundation calls for speculation.
If you understand the question, you can answer it.
Can I have the court reporter reread the question, please?
One moment. Question, and those payments represent interest, principal and interest for the loan for the particular property at issue. Would that be correct?
The one before that, please.
I think I'm confused. I thought
Question
that
would-
was the question. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the one before that, the question is, Mr. Selman cut checks. He made payments in the name of Marwan Masloub. Is that correct?
Thank you.
And I believe the answer to that one was yes. Is that correct, Mr. Masloub?
Yes.
Okay, and now the other question that she read first. Could you read that first one that you read, which is the last question I asked?
One moment. Question. Okay, and those payments represent principal and interest for the loan for the particular property at issue. Would that be correct?
I don't know.
I'll object to the Locke's Foundation calls for speculation like I did before.
So we've already discussed that he wrote checks to Marwan Masloub. So the question is, when he cut a check to Marwan,
No.
was that in the context of a specific loan that check that he's cutting, that any particular instance applied to?
Objected at Locke's Foundation and calls for speculation. You're asking what Mr. Salman did, not my client. Go ahead and answer if you can.
I never wrote checks to Marwan Masloub. I observed the writing of them by J. Solomon.
You observed the writing of checks by J. Salman to Marwan Masloub, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
And when he wrote a check to Marwan, what was he writing him a check for?
Objection, Locke's Foundation and calls for speculation.
You can answer it.
I'm going with my attorney's.
No, I'm not telling you not to answer. You can answer that question. If you know the answer.
Can you repeat the question again?
Could you read the question for me? If I'm off, then we're going to have problems. So,
Question, when he wrote a check to Marwan, what was he writing him a check for?
The check will be for interest and principal. Sometimes it's a separate check, I believe, for principal versus interest for each one of the properties.
so one check would be for one property.
Either the principal or the interest, yes.
So he might write two checks related to the same property, but one is principal and one is interest.
Correct. That's my belief.
Okay. And there were times where he wrote checks either earlier on or some other period that there were times that he did write a check that covered both principal and interest together for the one property. Would that be correct?
I cannot recall. I have to see an example.
Okay. Now, when he wrote these checks, this was through bill pay, right?
Objection lacks foundation, calls for speculation.
You can answer.
What's the question again?
These checks that were written, it was through bill pay. Is that correct?
Through Wells Fargo check writing feature.
So it wasn't a paper check, handwritten. It was through their electronic check writing system.
It produces a paper check.
It produces a paper check, but that's not how you experience the process. Is that correct?
Objection argumentative.
You
I
understand
do
the
not
question?
know. Jay enters a request to pay. He puts the address and the name of the person. Wells Fargo generates a check.
And that's
Paper
the
check.
same, and that's the same process that you did when you wrote him a management check, correct?
Objection that's vague and ambiguous, especially as to time and to content.
Do you understand or remember the question?
All I know, I'm answering what the procedure of writing the check, and that's it.
When you wrote a check to Mr. Salmon, you did it through some sort of online banking feature. Is that accurate?
It's the bill pay feature in Wells Fargo,
Right. And they send the check.
and they send the check. They remit the check.
And when you wrote a check to Jay for management, they would mail it to his home.
Yes,
And when he wrote a check to Marwan for the loan, that went to your home, correct?
it went to my house. Yes, because that's a U.S. address for my brother on his Wells Fargo accounts.
And when the check arrived, what happened to the check? Since your brother's not in the US, what happened to the check?
I'll deposit them in his Wells Fargo bank account. I had the general power of attorney on his Wells Fargo bank account.
So you would deposit the check that came to your house into Marwan's Wells Fargo checking account?
Correct.
Did you ever deposit that check anywhere else?
Yes. After somewhere around 2016, I was instructed not to use those bank accounts at Wells Fargo. So I deposit them at a TD Waterhouse, yeah, bank account in his name.
Did you have a power of attorney for that account as well?
I'm a type of a tenant of uncommon for that account, but I'm secondary on the account.
Okay, so his name was on the TD. That became Ameritrade, right, at some point?
TD, yeah, it is Ameritrade, and now, yeah, it is.
Okay, so at some point, now you referred that you were instructed not to use the Wells Fargo accounts anymore, and I think you said accounts plural. Was there more than one Wells Fargo account that was in Marwan's name?
I do not know what accounts he had with Wells Fargo, except for the ones that I had general power of attorney on.
Okay, and so you were depositing the checks there until you were instructed to now deposit them. You said
Yes.
around 2016, is that what you said, into TD Ameritrade?
2015, 2016.
And who
I
instructed
cannot
you? Okay, thank you. Who instructed you not to use the Wells Fargo account any longer?
Marwan.
Marwan?
Yep.
When you put those checks into the Wells Fargo checking account, and then after you were instructed to put it in TD Ameritrade, did Marwan know you were putting the checks into either of those accounts?
I do not know what he knows.
You didn't. Did you talk to him at the time to ascertain whether he knew?
I was not talking to him. I told you that in the beginning of this.
But if you're not talking to him, how did he instruct you to stop using the Wells Fargo account? I guess I'm trying to understand that.
A written document,
Do you still have a copy of that document?
not in hand, no.
You think you could find it if you needed to?
I doubt it.
So, what was the nature of the instruction? Is what I'm trying to understand. You guys, at the time of this instruction, you guys are having a falling out already. Would that be accurate?
Not yet.
Okay, so you were, but you still weren't talking to him at the time, or you were at that time?
No, there was a totally different per family matter that was necessitated that I don't talk to him about things happening in his household, and I kept it to a minimum.
Did you use the Wells Fargo bank account that Marwan owned and you had the power of attorney on? Did you use that for anything other than depositing these checks written by Mr. Salmon?
No. I might have paid his annual fees.
But in terms of actively using the account, I think you
No.
just told me that he told you to stop using that account. Is that what I understood you to, is that accurate? He informed you to stop using that Wells Fargo account. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
And was he saying, stop putting my checks there, put them here instead? Is that the nature of the message, or was it, don't touch the account anymore, period?
Just don't use that account.
Or anything?
Yes.
But are you saying that, okay, I'll make sure I understand though, because you did say, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you're not sure if he knew the checks were being deposited into either of those accounts. Am I correctly stating what you said?
He has access to the TD. I mean, he has access to the Wells Fargo accounts, both of them, that I was aware of.
So you never had a conversation with him ever from the beginning of doing business with using under the name MJ Ventures. You never had a discussion where you told him you were putting the checks into the Wells Fargo account. Would that be correct?
No, he knew that I was depositing because he has access to those accounts. There was no question of trust there.
There's no question of trust because he trusted you at the time, is what you're telling me?
I had the power of attorney to do what he entrusted me to do.
Okay, so are you saying because he had access and should have known, is that the entire basis of you saying he did know? Do you have any other information other than just he should know that he actually knew?
Objection, it's a compound question. I also repeated your prior question, and I don't think he can answer that question as phrased.
All right. So I just want to make sure I understand. I'm a little confused. I'm sure it's my problem. He told you to stop using the account. You said he knew that the loan payments, I believe that's how we characterize those payments, were being deposited into his Wells Fargo account. And I believe that what you told me is he had access to the account. But did you ever have a conversation with him ever, or notify him in any way where you know that he got the notification that the checks were going into the Wells Fargo account?
Tell me the last sentence, please, again.
I'm going to have you read it back.
One moment. And I believe what you told me is he had access to the account, but did you ever have a conversation with him or ever notify him in any way where that he got the notification that the checks were going into the Wells Fargo account?
Historically, I always reviewed what we have paid and how we performed on the properties, because he, as an investor, as a source of fund, source of the capital, he needed to know how we are performing. And so I communicated year after year from 2012 forward about what we have invested in and what we paid him, until he instructed me not to use the bank account.
Okay, so what you just described, this accounting process where you gave him this information, was this in writing?
I would give him a copy of financial statements, and I would be talking to him on the phone.
So you would give him a copy of things that are already in the Dropbox folder and are still in the Dropbox folder. Would that be correct?
It's more about what he earned in interest and principal paid, and how the properties are performing.
And when would you?
Not everything necessarily in Dropbox, because those come out of the software.
And what would you estimate to be the last time you had a conversation with him? You said you did some of this over the phone. When would be the last time you spoke to him over the phone relative to what we're talking about right now, the accounting to the performance?
About the first quarter of 2016, probably either Q1 or Q2 of 2016.
And you were getting along with him at that time?
Yes.
I'm going to scroll down here. I'll just real quickly, 4.01 profits and losses commencing on the initiation date of MJ Ventures, namely December 30th, 2011, hereof and ending on the termination of all business of MJ Ventures, all profits, losses, and all other allocations to the joint venture shall be allocated as follows at the conclusion of each fiscal year or at the close of escrow of any property when sold. Maher Masloub 50%, J. Salman 50%. Has this paragraph I'm going to move on. I think we might get bogged down there. So. In the middle of this paragraph, starting here, it says Maher Masloub or J. Salman alone shall not participate in or have any control over the joint venture business, nor shall either of them without the other one have any authority or right to act for or bind the joint venture or sell any of the properties owned. However, both venturers, J and Maher, may meet and resolve to delegate certain job or duties to either one of them. That decision has to be made and documented in writing in order for it to be valid for any or all involved to prove such delegation has taken place. I read that accurately, correct?
What was the verb? You did that what?
I read that accurately. Is that correct?
Yeah. Are you reading something? Because we don't hear your voice.
I'm
Sorry,
looking
he's in
over
charge.
something before I waste court reporter typing. 1 second.
Since you're reading there, Ms. Reporter, when you reread those portions of the deposition And in the future, would you print out what you read so there's no confusion?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah, when you reread part of the deposition, I'd like you to read what you read back to us and put it in the transcript so there's no question about what was reread.
Oh, yes, of course.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to read the next section, Article 8, Indemnification of the Joint Venturers. The parties to this agreement shall have no liability to the other or any loss suffered which arises out of any action or inaction if, in good faith, it is determined that such course of conduct was in the best interests of the joint venture and such course of conduct did not constitute negligence or misconduct. The parties to this agreement shall be indemnified by the other against losses, judgments, liabilities, expenses, and amounts paid in settlement of any claims sustained by it in connection with the joint venture. Did I read that accurately?
You read it accurately.
Okay, do you believe that Mr. Salmon has engaged in any misconduct in related to the case that we're in right now?
I'll object as it may call for legal opinion, but as to his lay understanding, I have no objection. He can answer the question.
Very good.
Is that question, can you repeat that question one more time?
Do you believe Mr. Salmon has engaged in any misconduct as it relates to this lawsuit?
The distribution of dollars in one of the properties that was sold after this trial had started, after this case was open, was inaccurately dispersed to his own account or somehow the monies, and he did the accounting work that I'm supposed to do, and without consulting with me, he ended up sending money to Mr. Maher Masloub. It's the wrong amounts. He ended up dispersing to himself a big sum of money, and he gave me an equivalent sum of money that he got for himself. I think that was totally inappropriate. He also hired an accounting firm in one of the years to do accounting when I'm responsible for that job. And the accounting was filed with the IRS, where the taxes were filed by that CPA firm, was filed in the IRS, and they were incorrect. I had to go through and reverse all of that stuff to correct it. So unilaterally, he was doing things that might not be the best interest of this business.
At the time he made, as you're describing what he did, at the time he made a payment to Maher Masloub, and you said it was the wrong amount. Was that amount an amount less than what MJ Ventures owed Maher Masloub at the time?
Yes.
And he gave you, and he split what remained, or whatever amount he gave himself, he gave you the equivalent amount, is what you, I believe that's what you said. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Do you personally owe Maher Masloub any money as of today?
Personally, no. Actually, he owes me, if I want to really be accurate.
How much does he owe you?
I don't know. I don't keep account because it's not worth it.
Well, can you at least give me some idea what we're talking about?
$700,000?
Does this have some connection to the inheritance issue
Partially.
we talked about earlier?
Partially.
And the part that's not related to the inheritance, what is that related to?
His wife stole from me.
Now, he gave, I think you said he gave about
2/3 of
majority
that.
of that back through the purchase of Forain, correct?
Yes.
And you said you forgave him for the difference?
Yeah. I had to.
Did she steal other money?
Not to my knowledge.
One moment, I'm just reading through a couple things here. How often does Marwan come into the United States? Do you know?
I don't keep track of that, sir.
When he comes to town, as far as you know, does he see his mom?
The last time I was aware he was in town, yes, he saw his and he attended his dad's funeral.
Did you say that's 2017 around? Is that what you said?
Around then, yes.
That's the last time you were aware that he was even in the US?
Honestly, I do not know. Yeah, I mean, from my knowledge, yes.
As best as you know, say between 2009 to present, what would you estimate that you're aware of the number of times he actually came in to the US?
Until 2017, I would say 5 times.
And since then, you have no knowledge.
I don't track.
When he comes to town, as far as you recall, how long does he typically stay?
Objection, assumes facts not in evidence that he had a pattern, a custom.
Well, if you understand the question, you can answer it.
I'm not telling him not to answer.
If he stayed at my house, sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes 3 days.
And does, as far as you know, at the times he stayed, was it your understanding that he just went back home afterwards?
He is at those times he was employed by an international organization that necessitated him travel around the world for his job. So I do not know he would be destined to his home base in Canada or going to his assignment. I don't recall these things.
You consider Marwan a trustworthy individual?
Objection lacks foundation.
I'm not a psychologist or a friend.
No, I'm asking you if you consider him trustworthy.
I can't answer that question.
You can answer the question whether you, the question may be overbroad, but if you can answer the question, I would ask you to do so.
Okay. Until our not inheritance dispute, until our family dispute, I used to think he's very trustworthy. But after something that was done by him in between 2016 and 2017, I had doubts.
what did he do that caused you to no longer trust him in 2016 or 2017?
He put his mother under so much stress, unnecessary stress, about him having a terminal disease when he's still alive till today, and doesn't have anything serious. Probably has something, but he scared her to death, and I did not appreciate that from him.
Did you think he was being manipulative with that, or just trying to get
Yeah,
attention?
yeah,
Did you speak with him about that, or did you just?
I did. And that's the last time I talked to him with intention.
Do you happen to know? Did you introduce Mr. Salman to Marwan? Do you recall whether you were the one who introduced him to Marwan?
I'm sure it was through me.
You know when that? Did you recall how far back it was that happened?
I wouldn't know. I can't remember.
Was it in the 90s or was it later?
I cannot answer that question accurately. I don't think it's the 90s though.
Was it before or after 2009?
Most probably before, but I could be wrong.
Did you ever see Mr. Salman and Marwan in each other's presence?
Um, my mom told me that Jay Solomon was reaching out after my settlement in Masloub versus Masloub. That Jay Solomon was reaching out to him within a week after that settlement. I wasn't involved. I wasn't, in direct communication with my brother, but my mom passed that message to me. Be aware of Jay Solomon.
So just make sure I understand. Do you ever recall seeing them in each other's presence?
Not through my eyes, no.
Did anyone ever tell you?
I seen him in my dad's funeral.
Okay. Is that you recall any other time that you might have seen them in each other's presence?
I can't recall.
Do you recall whether or not they were in each other's presence around the time that Farain was purchased?
Yes, we are in the presence of a real estate agent.
So maybe two times that we can identify it, at least for now.
Face to
Well, then-
face, I can attest to that, yes.
Did either of them tell you that they had ever had a conversation out of your presence?
Did either of them tell me that?
Yes.
No, I don't know.
Did you ever have a conversation with Marwan about Mr. Salman prior to the MJ Ventures formation?
I might have, yes. I might have talked to Marwan about Jay.
But you have no recollection that you did?
Not specifically, no.
Did you ever give Mr. Salman Marwan's phone number or contact information?
I cannot recall.
Now, your brother filed his lawsuit. Well, let me ask you, do you remember the year he filed the lawsuit against you?
If you have it, he's,
I'm looking at my notes about the lawsuit. No, I know when the judgment was made, but not when it started.
When you first got served that lawsuit and you noticed that it said Maher Masloub as an individual, and then it said Maher Masloub doing business as MJ Ventures, did you inform Mr. Salman that that the name MJ Ventures had been named on the complaint?
I have informed Jay Solomon multiple times that MJ Venture is being sued. I cannot tell you when was the first time.
Well, can you help me without, maybe you don't know the date, but can you help me understand what brought about that notification? What made you tell him when you did tell him?
It's something common to the business. It's his best interest to know about it as well as much as I know about it.
You believe you told him immediately or very quickly, shortly after you were served?
When I was served for the first lawsuit, I had no reason not to communicate with Jay about these things.
Well, okay,
But I cannot recall.
okay. Um, Ms. Court Reporter, if I send the exhibits through the chat feature, is that adequate to number the exhibits for you, or should I send them separately after this is done?
We can do it after through email.
I don't think I have explicitly numbered any exhibits yet, but I do want to take the partnership agreement that's on the screen and go ahead and make that exhibit number 1. And I'm going to go ahead and just send it through the chat just so everyone has a copy now. I'm going to share my screen for a moment. Are you able to see the screen, Mr. Masloub?
Hold on, let me see. Give me a sec. Okay.
Maybe make it a little smaller. See if that helps. Does it look familiar?
Yeah,
Okay.
looks familiar.
Is this the Dropbox folder setup for MJ Ventures?
I cannot see whose account this is, but it looks like the same structure folder-wise.
Okay, and there's a, on the right over here, it says, it lists some parent members who've given access to this. I'm gonna click this to show all members. You kind of see this list of people who can access this folder.
John Mulvena, yes, I given access to John so he can make copies to Mr. Miller. Who else? I can see the whole list. I'm sorry. I see
Okay,
Jay. I granted Jay that.
yeah, okay.
I
And
own
then
the
on,
account.
okay, you're the owner, okay. And did you set this account, do you remember when you set this account up?
I would say probably in 2012.
So right around the time maybe that you started MJ Ventures?
Yes.
Okay. Who is, I noticed on top there's a name, says Bassam Shahini, or am I saying that?
Yeah. Oh, this is an error. He shouldn't have access to it at all. He can view, but he cannot edit, it seems here. He has nothing to do with this. He is a cousin of my ex-wife. He's an uncle to my children. He has no interest in this Dropbox. Probably by mistake, we assigned him. I gave him access, or by mistake.
Okay. So this Dropbox account was created just to be devoted to MJ Ventures interests and activities. Would that be fair?
Correct.
Okay. And when's the last time you actually accessed this folder, if you remember?
Last night.
Okay. And in connection with today's deposition, or for just other reasons?
Yeah, I was trying to reconcile some numbers on the declarations, and I wanted to look at it. I wanted the parcel identifiers for the properties, and I can get them from this folder.
Okay. Apart from this suit, in terms of just general MJ Ventures purposes, do you need to access this for any reason with any regularity?
No, just for accounting purposes, year-end purposes, and taxation purposes, and any regulatory documentation.
So how often would you say that you've been on here in the last, say, 3 years?
Anytime I see on the Wells Fargo bank accounts, there is a large sum amount of money. I try to see here and see if there are receipts on it anywhere. I do know if Jay drops a document here, I get notified.
Okay.
Sometimes I'm interested in those documents. That's really our mode of communication, if you want to say. But I saw the name on when you showed me the share. I saw a real estate agent's name in the share. Can we look at the shared list of names?
You're not, his question is done. You don't need to.
No, someone has been given access.
Okay.
Well, these are the names
Dana.
that I see. Yes?
That's you. Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
You're crossing with
Yeah.
Dana. Okay, got it.
Okay.
I apologize.
Oh, no problem. I wanted to, there's a document on here. Actually, I think I know what it is. I'm just going to If I can find it here, I'm going to ask you a question about it.
Are we marking this screen as an exhibit?
Not at the moment.
Well, I'd like to have it identified so that it can be attached as an exhibit. Please.
You just want the just as it stands like that?
Yeah,
The
whatever
screen-
you've been
the
showing,
screen?
whatever been showing Mr. Masloub, I want to have it documented in the record.
Well, the screen's constantly changing, so do you want me to screenshot the screen or just make sure that the documents that I get to, those definitely will be marked.
I
If you want me
understand,
to
but
screenshot the
what,
screen, I can do that too.
yes, please do that.
All right, so I'm going to screenshot it just as it is, so I don't know. What it will look like, but I'm going to do that. So, send that to you. So we're sending this as a JPEG, but it'll be Exhibit 2. Okay. Do you recognize what I put on the screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, make sure how many pages there are. There's 3 pages on here. What is this? In fact, what I'll do is I'll make this Exhibit 3 and call it balance sheet. I'm sending this to the chat. This is balance sheet is the name of it. Can you tell me what we're looking at here? I've sent you a copy too if you would like to look at it, whatever is convenient for you.
Can you hear me? Just double
Yes,
check.
I can hear you now.
Okay.
Yes.
It is MJ Ventures balance sheet for 2017.
Okay, and this says on here 03/22/18. Is that the date this was prepared?
That was the date it was generated, yes.
Okay, and you generated it with you have a particular software you use to generate
QuickBooks,
QuickBooks. Okay, and you generate this balance sheet for what purpose?
to do the accounting, to prepare, to keep track of expenses, and to prepare taxes.
Okay, and do you give this to anybody or just use it for your own reference?
I'd give a copy to Jay,
Okay,
a copy to me, and its content gets fed into the tax preparation software. And
Okay.
before 2016, I used to review it with with Marwan Masloub as part of the performance of the company.
So before 2016, now 2016, are we talking later in the year, beginning of the year, the whole year, just so I understand? You had mentioned earlier.
I said earlier, either the first quarter of 2016 or the second quarter of 2016.
Okay, so that might have been the last time that you,
Yes.
okay. And before that time, you would regularly give him the balance sheets?
I don't
Who's him?
We're talking about Marwan at the moment.
know. I will show him the balance sheet.
Okay, and how would that happen? To show it to him, what did you have to do to show him?
When he's visiting, I'll go through the data with him.
But if he doesn't visit, will he see any of this?
I'll just, I think in those days in 2016, 15, Skype was being used to share a screen.
Do you specifically remember using Skype to show him balance sheets?
I can't remember what the tool, but most probably it was Skype in those days.
Okay, but you do remember showing him something electronically over some sort of program like Skype? Is that what you're saying?
Well, objection, that misstates his testimony.
I know in 2016 and 2016, I showed him a physical copy because he was sitting next to my desk in my own house. Before that, 2015, probably I've shown him through a Skype call. He was in Africa.
How often between 2011 and 2016 did you have an opportunity to show him balance sheets or related documents?
I would say 4 times.
About
4 times.
Did that course, was that just random or did it correspond to like an annual situation?
He would be in the US.
Okay. But when you're on Skype or something, that would be him out of the US, right? In that
That's
context?
1 or 2 times. 1 or 2 times. Yes.
On Skype or something
Yeah.
similar? Okay, so I just want to look at this together. It says assets, December 31, 17. It says current assets, and it shows pretty much exactly what you described to me earlier. It shows accounts for each of the properties. It shows two, like a general checking and a general savings. Then there's a petty cash account. So my question for you is this represents the cash assets of MJ Ventures at this time?
Yes. From an accounting perspective, yes.
Okay. Who held on to the $2,846 cash, if you know?
If we probably look deep into it, it is basically a purely a catch-all category. It's not linked to a bank account and it's not in anybody's pocket. It's probably holding discrepancies,
Okay.
accounting discrepancies.
Okay. And then I'm going to scroll down and look at the fixed assets.
Mhm.
And it says number 1, Ukaipa. That's the house. That's the first house that MJ Ventures purchased, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And it says total property value is $66,219.38. Well, hold on a second. Let me. I don't want to spend too much time on this. Let me see if I can save some time here. One moment. Okay, let's just start down here on the long-term liabilities on page 2. You have the number 1 loan, Ukaipa Wildwood, and it says that the original loan amount is $67,219.38, correct?
Yes.
So can you tell me, how do you figure out what the original loan amount is going to be?
You bought a property, you have fees that goes with it, and you document that. You have screenshots in the Dropbox. You assemble all of that, and you come up with that thing. If you are on the accounting software, you click on that number, and it shows you all the numbers that contributed to it.
Okay, so you buy the property, you need a certain amount to go through escrow, and then you know you're going to have to fix it up, and you're going to be bearing other expenses as well, correct?
Correct. Correct.
And then, okay, and then so during that process, you're able to add additional funds to the project, and ultimately, once you figured out we're done spending money, you've reached a point where now you say this is going to be the loan amount, and that's kind of set in stone at that time.
Yes.
long
Sometimes we
does
get
it-
more.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
No,
That's exactly what it is.
Okay, so on average, 6 properties plus the one that has two lots. But what's on average the time it takes from the time you first put money into escrow and then go through the process of fixing up the property and then finally get to the point where it's clear how much the loan is going to settle on? How long does that process on average take? Or in this
Objection
case,
It's overbroad and compound because there are multiple properties and they're individual.
okay, did you understand my question about on average? Just trying to get an
There is
idea
no
of
on
how-
average. That's what we're going to say. There's no on average.
Well, in the case of 6 properties where we know what they are, can we create an average?
No,
I mean,
mathematics is incorrect
okay,
because
so how
these
long
are
did it,
6 discrete quantities.
okay, well, how long did it take, to your best estimate, before you settled on the original loan amount for Ukaipa from the day that you first started the escrow process?
I don't know. You mean how much it took us to rehabilitate it and rent it?
Well, I'm asking you, there's a certain point in time where you go, okay, the loan amount is now 67,219.38.
Right.
That makes sense, right? So I'm trying to figure out, when did that happen versus when you opened escrow?
Objection, it's big and ambiguous.
I really don't know how to give you that number. Give me the controls that you're talking about.
You entered
What are
into
you trying to
escrow.
control here?
What am I trying to control? I'm trying to find out from the time that you found the property and you opened escrow until the day that you said, okay, this is the loan amount. That's going to cover a period of rehabilitation and costs, right, that are going to accumulate until you finally reach that final number. Am I correct?
Okay. No, it's not correct. This is it is cash accounting versus accrual accounting. What you're talking about and you're describing in good way is accrual accounting. This is a cash business, a cash accounting business. And in cash accounting, you look at your receipts, and when you see you stabilized and no more receipts, you allocate funds. There's another area on the balance sheet where you acquired funds from a source. And from that fund, you might have acquired 100,000 and you just needed 67,000. Then you would say, I have this much receipts. This is the amount of loan of 67,000 against the originally sourced funds of 100,000.
Okay, so at some point, the original loan amount became 67,219.38 cents, correct?
Yes.
And then you create an amortization schedule for that loan?
Once we commit to the original loan amount, yes.
And from that point, that loan amount stays the same until it's paid off, right?
Unless there was a missing document and we done, and then we can correct it. And usually we correct it as a secondary line, but in this case there isn't. Or if it crosses the boundary of an annual period, because we're accounting annually, then you will have to create 2 separate assets. And there's a loan somewhere here that has actually two occurrences of original loan amount. I do not know the property from this display, but there's one like that.
Okay. All right. So at some point in time, now you said on the first property that you had contributed a portion of those funds yourself, and then the rest of it was Marwan. I believe that's
I
right.
think that misstates his testimony. He thought that it was the first one.
Correct. I
Your
thought.
testimony is that you thought the first loan. Is it possible that all these loans, all 6 loans, are entirely 100% Marwan? Is it possible?
100% Marwan Masloub.
Wait, I don't understand I'm sorry. You said you thought you might have contributed to one of the loans, and you thought it might be Ukaipa, correct?
Correct.
Okay, but if you're mistaken, would that mean that you would have contributed on one of the other loans, or that you just didn't contribute at all on?
I didn't contribute on the other loans. So let's exclude from your question, let's exclude Ukaipa, because Ukaipa has probably a mixed contribution, 2 sources. One is Marwan, and very minute amount, probably less than 20 grand from Maher. The rest are 100% from Marwan.
Okay, so we've got the first loan is $67,219.38. That's the original loan amount, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and each of these properties has a number next to the original loan amount. So instead of going through them all separately, it'd be safe to say that all the original loan amounts are accurate as to these separate properties. Would that be fair?
Yes.
Okay, and on Beaumont, number 2, it says pay off Beaumont Magnolia 66,852.80, which is equal to the original loan amount, and then there's 0. And is that because this property had been paid off prior to this creating this balance sheet?
Yes, this property was sold. There was profit in it. We apply from the proceeds, net proceeds, we apply the 66,852.80 against the loan, and we pay off. That's the payoff amount. We send it to Marwan as a source, and then whatever's left, we split as profit, J and I.
And what was your method to get that 66,852.80 to Marwan? How did you do that?
And that I don't remember the year, and probably it's a Wells Fargo deposit.
Okay, so based on your recollection, would this have occurred would this have been a wire from the escrow, or would this have been taken care of from like the bill pay account where
Objection. It's vague and ambiguous as to the adjectives that you're using, and I don't understand what account you're referring to.
So based on the arrangement you had set up, not that everything happened according to plan, but what was supposed to happen in this scenario? Get the money from escrow basically wired to designated MJ Ventures account, and from there you would write a check. You would have Mr. Salmon write the check in your presence, basically to Marwan. Is that kind of what you would expect to happen?
You do a payoff check, and then any pending principal and interest, you would write checks to correspond with those two, and you send them to Marwan in the name of Marwan.
Okay, and if there's any arrears on the mortgage payments, you would write a separate check for that as well?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So looking at this, MJ Ventures paid off loan number 2 as of the date of this, well, I guess as of 12/31/2017, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then number 3, Barstow Main Street, this is telling us that the original loan was $61,130.50, and that make sure I understand what I'm looking at here. So it says pay off main loan negative 3466.52. Help me understand. I'm a little confused, honestly. So is that that's how much you've paid off so far on the principal? Is that what that represents?
Correct. The principal, you accrue the principal and you apply it to pay off component. And when the payoff is zero, that means you paid off the loan.
Okay. All right. And then number 4, same kind of concept as number 2. This one had been paid off as of this date as well, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then number 5, it says Keith in this situation. Okay. So this one's still owe another $79,601.09 is still owed on the loan, correct?
Correct.
All right. And then Linda Lane, the original loan amount 82,288.54 cents. And then what is owed is $78,063.52, correct?
Correct. Now, this is as of end of 2017. And I believe Linda Lane took more than 2017. It was delayed and its delivery took about 11 months or 12 months to deliver, to rehab it. So I think there's also probably in the future balance sheet, you'll see another addition to the original loan amount. It's documented in the accounting.
Okay. Okay, so we have that as number 3.
Council, if it's a good stopping point, I'd like a break, please.
Absolutely. How long do you need? Whatever you need.
Just 10 minutes is fine.
Okay, perfect.
Good.
Do you have an idea as to how long we're going to go today?
Well, it could go quickly, but I'm suspecting a couple more hours.
Okay.
Good.
All council agrees to go off the record.
Yes.
The time is 12:31 p.m. We are going off the record. Please stand by.